Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Soulful Revolution, a podcast at the intersection of spiritual transformation and social change.
I'm your host, Lauren Kruba Thomas. I'm a priest, a writer, a spouse, and a twin mama living on the homelands of the Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne peoples in what is commonly called Littleton, Colorado.
And I'm Hannah, your co host. I am a mother, a seeker, an advocate, an agitator, and a sincerely curious person.
And we are so glad today to welcome you to listen to this episode as we interview our guests, Mike Martin and Hannah Martin. Hannah Rose Martin is a licensed Mennonite pastor and a reading interventionist in Colorado Springs. She is a BA in education and is currently dabbling in seminary courses. With her partner Mike and their two children, they work to build relationships and inspire change in the communities around them. Mike and Hannah enjoy spending time as a family with their sons, playing games, creating art, and building with Lego, especially enjoying the great Colorado outdoors. I should say they are my neighbors about an hour south. And Mike is the executive director and founder of Raw Tools. He lives in Colorado Springs with Hannah and their kids, and he learned to blacksmith in order to turn guns into garden tools. He's trained in restorative practices for high impact dialogue, conflict facilitation, and others. He's the co author of Beating Guns Hope for People Who Are Weary of Violence, as well as other curriculums related to gun violence prevention. And Hannah also is an author. She's the author of the newly released children's book, Sparking Peace, which we'll have a chance to talk about as well. Hannah and Mike, we are honored and delighted to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Same. Thanks for having us.
Great to be with you.
As a way of checking in and rooting ourselves in this conversation in this moment in time, we want to ask you a check-in question about the state of your soul in this season of struggle for justice. Where do you find yourselves spiritually right now?
Well, for me, I think I'm moving from a disoriented space and kind of back into a grounded space after the events of last week, working in gun violence prevention. So, and we'll talk a little bit about how that works later.
Yeah, I would say probably about the same. Carrying a lot of heaviness, but also actively seeking joy. Joy in the work, joy in community, and just, looking for where the kingdom is moving and how I can be more into that space.
You alluded to the events of last night, Mike, and I think that's a good place for us to begin. We're recording this episode a week after the shooting that happened at Evergreen High School, and also the shooting of Charlie Kirk and all that led to, all the debate and dialogue that has resulted in. And being in this space of the Evergreen shooting being the 100th school shooting of this calendar year, just the atrocity, the moral atrocity that is for all of us, and the horror that is for our kids. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to together thread for us, how did you first come into this peace building work and bring us up to this point? Like, what has your journey looked like over these years of contending for peace in the ways that both of you do that, with your writing, with your teaching, Hannah, with your pastoring as well, both of you, and with the work that you, especially Mike, do through Raw Tools?
Well, Raw Tools started just over 13 years ago. I guess we're coming up on 14, right after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. It was this idea of swords to plows in a modern context, guns to garden tools, was kind of in the making a year or two before that. And then after that shooting, it galvanized not only us, but a lot of other organizations to start. That was in December of 2012. So a lot of new organizations popped up at the beginning of 2013 to address this. A lot of them legislative and advocacy centered. And we come at this more from that restorative practice. Those who've been harmed in a centered space there, what do they need in the aftermath of that? But also often postvention and prevention have a Venn diagram that overlaps a lot. And so what are the things we can do to help people heal from the trauma of gun violence that also helps build, thinks of the long game and thinks more long term, that helps us not kind of reciprocate harm to each other, if to out of our own harm. And so, we started just going to places and listening to survivor stories. And while they were sharing, we would turn a gun into a garden tool and invite everybody into that process. And so that making of something totally new, but not totally destroying the old thing, creating something new out of it, has all kinds of metaphors for our own, spiritual path, our embodied path in this world, how we embody what we believe. So how do we turn our beliefs into a politic that we choose to live with each other? And so that has all of that fast forward to now. And to me, that's the thing that screams the loudest out of the last week or two, because the Catholic school shooting was just a week before that, where we have so much complex trauma and layered trauma that we have to navigate. And it's hard to find the right thing to say, the right thing to do. But it matters who we surround ourselves with in those moments. And I think we're kind of seeing different ripple effects of what that could look like in the aftermath of intense mass violence that we've experienced over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That says nothing of Gaza and the foreign implications of what this means.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mike, I really appreciated that you named so early in this conversation kind of a collective trauma that we have all been experiencing, being re-traumatized every time something like this happens again. Destruction after devastation, after repetition, after, you called it reciprocating harm to each other. That is such a powerful way to think about the trauma and violence that exists in between people and wanting to remove that from the system. So I really appreciate that. I find so much that we're stuck in a state of inaction. So many people want to do something, but we don't know what to do or how to best allocate our resources. Can you talk about the first moment that you actually made a garden tool from a gun? How did you get to that point of activation? And tell us about that.
Well, actually, I think maybe you could even tell about the day of Sandy Hook and how that affected you, because that's a part of this story.
Yeah. I was a first grade teacher at the time, and the number of lives, the number of lives that were lost that day was the same number of children I had present in my classroom that day. And it was, I created all of these out of school field trips. It's a Title I school, and we didn't always have access to things. And so that Friday night, I was welcoming all of the families to come and go to the zoo with me to do their lights and have a time together. And so I was carrying, like I said before, with my soul, I was carrying that heaviness, but also trying to seek out the joy that I still had these babies, that they were still mine, and that they were safe, and that we still had this community and this relationship together. So that was kind of when, my kid just said enough.
Wow.
And he had been ruminating with this idea and this, like, what does swords to plowshares look like today? What does this actually mean for us? And so that was kind of the, and I really hate to admit that it took something like Sandy Hook for us to feel activated. But that's what we see. We have these big things that happen, and we say enough. And one child should be enough, where everything changes, everything stops. And to have the opportunity to not go in the two places, we typically always think we have two options of what we can do. And so, have guns, don't have guns. But then to have this third way of, well, let's take guns and let's break them. let's take these tools that are used for death and transform them into tools that cultivate life. And I just thought that that was such a beautiful and powerful way to do this. And it started to even activating in my mind, what kinds of, spiritual imagination can I seek out in my own passions and my own gifts? And how do I bring that with me in just the span that I have to my reach? What can I be doing? Because it starts here. So how do I seek that out instead of thinking, well, this is the way we have to do it because this is the way we've always done it, but to think that we don't always have to live into the systems that are available to us. We can create our own.
Amen, amen, amen. 1,000 times over. May it be so.
I am really struck by that breakdown of the binary, because that can be such a mind shutting systems deregulating way of walking through the world. And it makes sense. Like when we're under stress, like those are the ways that we think. And so I wonder, when you are in the space of transforming guns into garden tools, how do you see folks breaking down the binary and finding a way forward?
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing that so much of this work, especially from our faith perspective, we like to create 5-year plans. But I think when you step into our faith spaces and try and activate in different ways, the Holy Spirit tends to show up and say, this is, if you're just open to like, hey, we're going to start this and see what happens, but also in the same way to say that, like, let's invite the divine into this work too, and not just have total control over it. And that happened at one of our first events. We do a lot of partnership with Shane Claiborne and in there in Philly. So we actually soft launched in Philly at an event. But then soon after that, we had an event back in Kensington, Philadelphia, which is one of the higher rates of gun violence in the Philly area. And we had 3 mothers who came that day to share their story. And actually happened to be, I don't think it was a coincidence, or I believe it was a coincidence, it wasn't meant this way, that one was a Christian, one was Jewish, and one was Muslim. And they had all lost
Wow.
to gun violence over the last 30 years, some recent, some as far as 30 years prior. And one of the mothers, Miss Cherie Ryans, came over, and after she shared, she said, can I take a turn at the hammer? And we're like, of course, that makes so much sense. It wasn't necessarily planned. It was something that came up. Even my memory now, it was either as we were walking through the run of show, essentially, or right after she spoke. So she came up and picked up the hammer. And when she hit it, after every hit, she would say, this is for my son. And then she kept going. And one of the instructions that we give before someone hammers now, and even then, that you strike while the iron's hot. That we know that phrase that comes from blacksmithing. That once it cools, if you keep hitting on it too much, it'll crack. So there's hardening there. There's a metaphor there with Pharaoh's hardened heart. But she kept going, and she essentially kept going until she couldn't hold the hammer anymore. And the photos that were taken of this show, like when she was done, the hammer was just a few inches off the ground. And so there was this, this is the moment that the binary broke for me, that there was more than just this transformation physical. There is this spiritual transformation, the somatic release of grief and pain that went through the hammer and into the gun that had brought her harm, and then at the same time was being transformed into a garden tool. So there's Shane likes to remind me that sacrament is the other way to say it is holy mystery, and there's something mysterious happening there that we can't fully describe, that maybe only each survivor can describe, because there isn't this crisp definition of it for us to talk about. Binary wants us to find. So from that point on, we have had that open invitation for folks at our events or at our shop. People often call me, especially other clergy folks who have responded to gun violence. We want to make this process, whether that's helping destroy the guns or at like public events that we do that look like buybacks but run a little differently, or they just come privately to the shop and they might bring some support people with them too to make something, or just get it out of their system because they know that it's not good to hold on like that. And so we'll have a lot of survivors that say, this is the healthiest way I've dealt with my anger or my pain, or or it might not even be, it just might be just like a sense of loss of love, right? If that's what grief is, it's the loss of love.
Yeah.
And they were able to express that and get that out so that they could go on.
I hear in your story something that feels deeply sacred, which is that we need to lament. We need to wail. We need to allow our sorrow to be present. We need to not deny or negate or disassociate from it, but that I think the divine invitation is to not stop there, is to see how much further the Spirit can take this pain into renewal. And that's not mean deepening the pain, but that I think oftentimes we think, well, that's it. This is so traumatic, so awful. There's just nothing to be done. And I hear in what you're saying that whisper of invitation that nothing is too far gone. Can I take a turn at the hammer is such a radical, humbling, powerful statement. A question, rather.
And even to say that no one is too far gone either. We have
No one.
we have a lot of people who have caused harm, including with a firearm, that have come to the anvil too. And
Wow.
and there's stories there, but there's a difference in time for everybody. We all have our own pace and how we navigate this. We might need to hear that whisper 1,000 times before we feel the courage or even the energy to. And there's no fault in any of that. It's just that we all need our own timing and pace. One of my favorite lines is a survivor who said, "I know my path is forgiveness, but I need my time. I need to do that at my own pace. I know that's where my destination is. I'm not there now, but I know that that's where I need to go."
I'm curious, Hannah, for you, as you think about formation, which you do in your role as a pastor, especially working with children, and for both of you as parents of young boys, what are the ways in which this creative embrace of nonviolence can be formed in us from a very young age? What are the ways that you are forming your boys and the children that you work with and the people that you pastor to practice this kind of creative nonviolence in their daily lives?
Yeah, that's a huge passion and something that I actually put into everything. And again, it's something that hasn't really been accessible before. There's not a lot of resources. As a children's pastor and a youth pastor to find curriculum or Bible studies that come from a peace hermeneutic that help with some of that creativity, that allows for curiosity and to not just always have to look for the moral, but seeing that when we access scripture, that it's going to hit us differently every time. Sometimes the same things will be there, sometimes they won't. But so I've had to come up with a lot of my own. I've had to write my own curriculum and create my own, our summer workshop that we do with our kids that other churches call VBS. We do a kids summer workshop that has been focused on that piece every single year. And something that's so beautiful for me is to see kids. We kind of talk to kids about Play-Doh. I have them actually hold on to Play-Doh, and I've done this with some events for Raw Tools where everybody has Play-Doh, and I ask them to create something that makes them sad or something they don't like. And sometimes they'll create a vegetable. Sometimes They'll make homework. Sometimes they'll make a weapon. They'll form it into a gun or into a knife, it varies. And they kind of look at each other's and they see what each other have created. And I ask them if it has to stay that way. If we have to keep these tools, these things that we don't like, and the kids with the vegetables are like, well, I guess it's good for you. And then, when we talk about these weapons, do we really need them? Is it something, should it always be an option that we have, that if somebody hurts us, we get to hurt them back? Or if we're angry, we are going to hurt ourselves or we're going to hurt someone else? Is that the right tool? Is that the proper tool to use when we're upset? And so we start to have that conversation about what kind of tools are helpful for us when we are experiencing something that we don't like, or that's hard, or that makes us scared or angry or sad. And I invite them to smush, completely smush those things that they don't like, and they get to transform it into something new, that brings them joy, that's helpful, that brings community, and so that's kind of the start to this process is, you have the power and you have the creativity and the imagination, and we have a God who loves us so much that creation is so spanned on all spectrums and all places. So seeing how creative our God, our creator is, and that we're made in that image, that we have that same creativity. Let's do the same thing. Let's turn it into something great. It doesn't have to be something that's ever been before, or it could be, and it's something we tweak to just fit it to what we need. And so that's been a big part of it, is just letting kids know that they have the ability to change something that they don't like. If it's in themselves, if it's in someone else, if it's in the world around us, that we can do it from a place of peace. We can do it from a place of mercy and grace, and it's a place of love.
I'm reminded of something that my friend Andre Henry always says, who's an activist and an artist, musician. He has a song where he sings, "It doesn't have to be this way." And it's such a simple idea that the world that we have is not the world that we're stuck with. But I think especially as adults, we can feel so helpless and resigned to the violence of the world. And it feels so hopeful to hear you name this simple Play-Doh transformation with children, where they're being empowered to claim that truth, that the world is changeable and that we get to partner with the divine in changing it. What an empowering thing to raise up children and youth who will grow into adults who still believe that. What a hopeful thing.
Amen. Ironically, one of my sons several years ago, we have a lot of family conversations about nonviolence and about our frustration with the way that the world is, without feeling like we have to accept that as final. And I'll base this question in my own story. So I was speaking to my sons, who are 8 and 11 as of this recording. And so they were a slight bit younger, but I was speaking to them once about how I hope we get to a world where we don't need guns, where we actually don't need these types of tools. And my older son retorted quite quickly, "Mom, I don't think that's likely." And I said, "But it's possible, isn't it?" And so I'd love to hear from you, Hannah, a little bit more about what the children have taught you through this peacemaking work, because as anyone, myself included, who has worked alongside with and for children will tell you, you think you're teaching them something, and in reality, they are often the teachers. So I'd love to hear you talk about some of the beautiful, surprising lessons that have emerged from this work with kids.
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest thing is the situations that arise that you're like, oh, I wasn't prepared on having this conversation, or with you responding this way. One of the ways is, we hear often when kids were playing, I mean, our kids are the same age as yours, Hannah, which is awesome. But they, they want to do what their friends are doing, and their friends have Nerf guns. Their friends do a lot of violent games, whether that's a video game or just reenacting things. And you kind of get this, well, they're not real. We're not actually hurting anybody. And it was like, well, how do I explain what this is? And because of that, that's one of the most powerful things that I get to share. And I even say it with my kids at school, in public school when I'm teaching, and I see one of them, get hurt, and so they hit somebody back, or they're playing a game, and there's no harm. Like, I'm just pretending to kill other kids, and they fall over dead at recess. It doesn't mean anything bad's happening. And so, I've heard other parents be able to use this too. And it's such a gift to just say, when we play, we're practicing. When we are playing, that is our imagination. That is our creativity. And when you're playing and you're playing something that kills or that hurts or harms, those are the things you're holding in your hand made out of Play-Doh that make you sad. And when we play those things, we're practicing for who we're going to be as we grow up. We're practicing for real life. Do you want to kill people when you're an adult? And granted, sometimes kids will say yes. But, most of the time they're like, well, no. Well, do you want to hurt others? Do you want others to hurt you? Do you really want to use these tools in real life? Because do you get back up when this weapon is used? Do you get back up? You don't. You're practicing. Your play is practice for who you're going to be as an adult. And having the tools now, having the creativity and the practice of using that imagination now to bring joy, to bring life, to bring goodness, that's where we should be practicing. That's where we should be pretending. And most of the kids are like, wow, they've never thought about that before. But I guess I've also had other children who, some of the things that they come back with are extremely powerful, especially when it comes to asking the question when we're in scripture, who do you connect with in the story? I wonder where you see yourself in this. And that's always been really beautiful. And, typically, again, with that binary language of good guys and bad guys, kids have really taught me that there's no such thing, that there's just people and choices. And so even the people, Zacchaeus is seen as this terrible tax collector. And he's horrible. He's stealing from his neighbors. But to have this story where Jesus calls him in and doesn't call him out, and he's actually holding the entire community accountable for the way that they are seeing Zacchaeus's harm as reciprocating that harm back to him. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to hang out with you. We're going to be BFFs, and we're going to go have a meal together. I love that. When I teach that to kids, they get it. It's really hard for grownups to make that connection to us and what we do in our lives today. But I just love kids come from all perspectives, and they really help you to see the belovedness that we seem to miss out on a regular basis as adults.
Hi, listener. Hannah here. I wanted to offer a moment to pause partway through our conversation. If you will, join me in a bit of a guided meditation, just to check in for our bodies and spirits. Close your eyes, if that feels comfortable to you, and consider what you've heard already through this conversation. Consider how that feels in your body, if it's something you can name, and if it is, think about it as if it were something you could hold. I invite you to consider this thing that you're holding Perhaps like a piece of jewelry that you're wearing around your neck. It might be something that's new, precious, expensive, rudimentary, dense, however you might describe it. And take a moment to interact with that piece of jewelry. Would you like to straighten it on your neck? Adjust it somehow? Do you want to take it off? Put it down? Are you comfortable carrying what you're holding through the rest of this conversation? What will it mean if you do, and what will it mean if you don't? I invite you to consider these things and make a decision that reflects what you need in this moment. We'll carry on with our conversation, but for now, I just want to say, I'm glad you're here.
I find myself really curious about your context. You live in Colorado Springs, which is the home of the Air Force Academy. It's the home of Focus on the Family, with all the Christian nationalism that has bred over the last few decades. And so I know that the environment that you're in is one that's not particularly agreeable to this perspective on Christian faith or on nonviolent praxis. And I imagine there's probably some level of hostility that you have faced in that space. I'm curious to hear about that. I wonder about the countercultural nature of what you're doing. I absolutely hear it in the stories that you're telling about children and your own boys being able to be in these spaces with their friends where they're being empowered by you to make some different choices. What is it like to be doing this work in your context at this particular moment in time as the violence is only escalating in our state, in our country, in our world?
One of the stories, when people ask us this question, one of the stories I talk about is a local, now he's a youth pastor, but at the time he did this, he started calling all the local churches after Parkland and asking, can I come talk to your youth group about gun violence, which is often kind of a thing that us churches do is when we talk about hard stuff, we might bring in a guest speaker to say the hard things, and then we can process the hard things together. So he was asking to do that, and eventually he called our pastor, and because of Raw Tools, we met, and then I would he would call others, and I might join him on some of those conversations with other pastors. But in his conversations with those pastors and the ones I was a part of, it was always, you can talk about suicide, but you can't talk about gun violence, or you can talk about violence, but you can't talk about gun violence. We can talk about that. It's kind of like saying it's not a gun problem, it's a person problem, but from a different perspective or a different intersection. And so I think that there's this hesitancy of I don't even want to just say pastors, but lay leaders and congregants to even have these tough conversations. And that goes to gun violence, that goes to Christian nationalism, because so many of the people sitting in the pews have a military experience, whether it's active or retired or, honorably discharged, all of those different kind of post-military labels that people can put on what a veteran is. But there's also a growing community of veterans who have been disenchanted with the military, whether that was through the experience with what it's becoming, how it's being used. So there is that kind of environment that is this Venn diagram that has an overlapping of the partisan and the theological that feels like it's becoming just one circle. But there's also a lot of people working against that. So there is like that narrative of folks who see that Focus on the Family and Navigators in Fort Carson and Space Force for just a little bit more, but Air Force, they're all here and they're all teaching people how to handle conflict with violence. We can't avoid that. So much so that when our county got funds to do suicide prevention, there were working groups put together that would include, there's different intersections of suicide, like there's different intersections of gun violence. They all need their own solution to solve that. And one of the working groups I was a part of was firearm safety. So there was also a separate one about drugs and prescription drugs. How do we keep those safe and locked so that people don't access those to create self-harm? And there were active conversations in our group saying it all out loud. How do we tell our community that these guns that they have been taught are a tool to bring peace are not good for them to be around when they're navigating crisis? And in those conversations, I see the binary breaking down. All of a sudden, the cognitive dissonance is laid plain in front of everybody, and they know what they're talking about, and yet they're still trying to have both. And so this is where it feels really binary to me. Even like Lauren, the post you shared recently about MLK's quote that it's nonviolence or non-existence. That binary makes sense to me, where we don't have this choice of violence and nonviolence or just war, because really Raw Tools is thinking globally and acting locally. That Raw is turned around, and that it's us repenting of our violence and choosing different tools. And so I think having these tough conversations is where it starts to have all of this. And when we think about the organizations that are in this town and the institutions that are in this town, they can make it harder for us to have these tough conversations. And so that's where I see the biggest influence of that dynamic playing out here, is that similar to grief, we're shoving it down and we're keeping it arm's length and we aren't talking about it. Where the more we learn about PTSD, the more families are realizing like, wow, I didn't know that that's what I was signing up for. Or there's a story of, and I'll stop here, of a recent intern who, as he was getting out of the Army, got to pick a place for him to intern at. And he had previously submitted a conscientious objection packet. And he was fortunate to have a sympathetic supervisor who created kind of like this other position for him to hang out with, because his 4 years was coming up and it would be faster for him to just leave at the end of the 4 years than to go through the CO process. And so because he chose to leave, the Army pays for an internship. So technically the Army paid for him to help us turn guns into garden tools, which is a fun thing in itself. But his story talks about how when he first transferred to Fort Carson, they did a drill, like they were clearing spaces and there were targets that they had to shoot at. And it was the first time, one, that they had actual photos of people on those targets, but also because he won it at the end, he was introduced to his company and said, "This is Lieutenant so-and-so, and all you need to know about him is that he's a Christian and he'll shoot you in the face." And that was the binary for him. And I think these are the tough conversations that point to like this Christian nationalist thing that says you're the best Christian if you fight for your family and you will do anything to protect them, but also extend that to our country, but not talk about where those two are at odds with each other, with what it looks like to see a Christ who lays down his life, but without taking others' lives.
So we have to talk more about this, because this is the conversation that's been unfolding over the last week since Charlie Kirk was killed. The conversation about what is a Christian. And so I want to invite the two of you to share what it means to be a Christian to you, and specifically as it relates to nonviolence. What does it mean to you to be part of the Mennonite tradition, which is a peace tradition, and tell us more about what that means? Because what has been so deeply unsettling for me in the last week is to see people that I perceived as center right or even center left politically, who have been doubling down on this narrative that because Charlie Kirk said that he was a Christian, that we can excuse all of the nasty, violent things, all the violent rhetoric that he espoused about queer people, about BIPOC, about folks who are against the ways in which the Second Amendment gets weaponized. I mean, the most infamous quote from him being that there effectively, this is my paraphrase, that there are acceptable deaths in light of upholding the Second Amendment. That there's some people are going to die, and that's just an acceptable loss that we all have to deal with. And so I don't want to delve too much into Charlie Kirk because he's been talked about ad nauseum, and I think that's exactly what he would have wanted. But I do want to use this opportunity to be able to say, what's the alternative to this Christianity that's about just saying I'm a Christian and then doing whatever the hell you want and espousing all the violent rhetoric you want, which is absolutely captured by that military leader who said that who was a Christian who'd shoot you in the face. Like, what a horrific thing. What is the robust alternative? And we've heard you describing that, and I would just invite you to share more about, yeah, what is that Christianity to you?
Yeah, Christianity is hard. And to be a Christian, the root word of Christian is Christ, which means I am a follower of Jesus. And I look at Jesus's life, and I even look at the Hebrew scripture prophets who spoke about this Christ who was coming. And I look at it and I see hard decisions all the time. It's the fruit of the Spirit. It's being able to say, even when it's hard, and as somebody who I know that what is about to come out of my mouth has been really hard for people to hear, Charlie Kirk is beloved. Charlie Kirk was made in the image of God, is a child. And as hard as it is for me on days to swallow it, to admit and to put down my own violence and say that what happened to him was not okay. No matter who it is, violence is never okay. He did not deserve to be shot. Guns shouldn't have been a thing. And Hannah, even though I know your son said, I think it's unlikely that we'll ever be to not need guns. I think it's now. We already are at the place. We are already living in a world where we don't need them. We think, but we don't. And a big part of that is the binary of needing to us and them, of needing to polarize, of needing to say it can only be one thing or the other. Do I believe that all humans are interconnected? Absolutely. That's part of my Christianity, of my faith, is seeing that Jesus was a bridge builder. Jesus was constantly on the side of those who were being treated as other. Jesus was constantly on the side of the oppressed, on the poor, of the widow, of the orphan, of those that society have shoved to the outskirts. And so I look at my world today and, I used to have that bracelet that says, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And I really feel like I really feel like we as Christians have forgotten to ask that question. When we're told to look like Jesus, that means to stand and hold each other accountable when we are not following Jesus. When Jesus was not holding a gun. Jesus was not holding a weapon of any kind. Jesus, even on the cross, was offering forgiveness and seeing belovedness in those who were creating violence and who were oppressing. And so for me, being a Christian is just doing what I can to follow Jesus. Do I believe that Jesus would want everyone to have safe housing? Yes. Do I believe that Jesus would want everyone to have an access to the education they need? Yes. Do I believe that Jesus would want everyone to be fed and get the food they need? Yes. Do I believe that Jesus would want everyone to be healthy and get the health care that they need? Yes. And so everything I do, being a Christian means looking at Jesus and applying that to current events in my life today. And that's seeing that people get what they need that people know that they are loved, and that I offer that love to them, even when it's really hard for me to. Even, and there are some days where I'm like, I let God take it because I can't. Or I'm like, God, I know you want me to love them, but it's really hard for me right now. So I need to give this to you. I know you love them. So I'm going to give my share to you because I can't give it right now. And I think admitting that, seeing that, that's a big part of it too, is doing the hard thing, not the easy thing.
Mm.
And seeing the kingdom now. That's another big part of being a Mennonite, being an Anabaptist, is seeing the interconnectedness of all humanity and seeing that I am not here to die. I am not alive to die. Jesus was not alive to die.
Mm.
It was Jesus was born and then he died and then he resurrected, and that's all that I pay attention to. He had 33 years to show us what it meant to be human. I look at those 33 years and wonder, like, where do I fit into that? How do I live that out? I saw Jesus as having a choice every day to offer heaven or to offer hell. Um, and we do that every day. We have the same choice. We can offer heaven, we can offer the kingdom of that interconnectedness, of that belovedness, or we can offer hell. And it's up to us to make those choices each day. No good people or bad people, people who have that choice. What are you going to offer today? And if we're offering a lot more hell than we are heaven, then I do think that there needs to be some self-reflection and some accountability from our beloved family members to let us know when, you're saying one thing, but you're offering another. Let's try again.
Yeah, I think from an Anabaptist perspective, the tradition was born out of a separation of church and state, that Anabaptist means to rebaptize. And they were doing that because baptisms at infancy after birth were tied to the census. And so to not choose to do that wasn't just to defy the church, it was also to defy the state at the time. And so to say, you get to make this choice as an adult. And what they say, once you've reached the age of accountability. So that isn't just like, oh, all of a sudden I decide I'm accountable. It's a discernment between you and your community, that they can see you holding yourself accountable, that there's a level of integrity that starts to be measured. But for me, that's where we're starting to break it down, that when those of us who have chosen to be baptized in Christ have also chosen to be held accountable by each other. And we don't know how to give or receive criticism anymore without flying ourselves to an extreme, without
100%.
othering the other person. It doesn't matter. And I hate the left-right binary too, that linear thing. It's a three-dimensional thing. We're coming from all different kinds of spaces, our own experiences, our own trauma that is pushing us to believe and act in certain ways that when we start holding each other accountable, we don't necessarily we have to do that with people we have a relationship with. It doesn't help for me to scream through the internet to somebody that I don't know to act better. That's not going to land, even if I'm correct. And even if criticism against me is correct, if I don't know the person, I'm not really going to be listening because there's no connection, right? It's not going to land well, even if it's right. And so it's incumbent upon us, especially within our church families and chosen and unchosen families, that when we are choosing to be held accountable to a life following Christ, then we need to be able to receive that criticism, analyze it, talk about it with our friends. And I love that Quaker practice of sitting in circle and asking questions to help someone clarify a decision. I think that's something a lot of us other traditions would be really helpful to use and borrow from them.
Amen.
Yeah, I think that our inability to deal with these tough questions, these tough criticisms waged against us or given to others, it's easy to kind of push our hand out and keep the stiff arm and not really want to process that. But we need to get vulnerable. That to me is so much of what we're going to hear in the next month is hardening of our schools, getting more guns out there. But the faithful response should be vulnerability and being able to hold our actions. I do stuff I regret. I say things to people I disagree with. That the second they've been said, I'm like, oh, that didn't work. Like, I know it didn't work, but am I willing to say, oh, dang it, I'm sorry, cousin or friend or fellow believer in my church, that I I know how that landed. I can already see it in your face, and I'm sorry that that came out that way. Can I try and rephrase it? And we have to continue to give each other chances to turn around, to do the small, like repentance can feel like the scary thing, but it really is a million small things that really keep us moving in the right direction. But it all comes back for me, like Raw Tools is exchanging our tools, whether it's tools of empire for tools of the cross or the church, that help transform our lives. It's constant transformation, and you don't do that unless you're vulnerable.
Yeah. I'll also add that we saw a lot of that vulnerability in Jesus. And man, did he know how to offer accountability. Like, that's a part of it too. Like, Lauren, you were asking, like, we can't just say we follow Jesus and then not follow Jesus and then do all these things that are literally the opposite of what Jesus taught us. But there was still love and peace when Jesus turned over those tables and sat there and like actually made the whip. Like, he didn't just show up, like he had that anger that stayed with him. And after he put that whip together, he said, yeah, I'm still going to do this. And he went and flipped over those tables. And so sometimes I feel like, when we think about accountability or seeing the belovedness, it always or being kind, like just be nice. There's a difference between being nice and being kind. When there's kindness, you are seeking out the deeper inner self of somebody. You're not just, saying shallow with niceties, and so Jesus offered that with flipping the tables. Jesus offered that when he told the rich young man to let go of everything he had and come and follow Jesus. He had that kindness when he offered the woman at the well his water of life and kind of let her know, like, I know you, I see all of you, but I'm still giving you this. I am still offering you this belovedness. And it was that same love and grace and mercy was even there when he was calling them brood of vipers. So I feel like, there's a wide spherical spectrum of the ways that we show up for each other, and to be willing to hear that you're the viper, or to be able to hear that you're clinging to something that you need to let go of, that relationship you have with someone, they're doing it with the same love, the same mercy, the same grace that Jesus taught us.
That is such a vision of the kingdom that, like, we commit to holding each other accountable, which means we don't let each other off the hook, and we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to show our true selves to trusted people in an effort to better understand ourselves, the world around us, our communities, and who we believe God has created us and called us to be. I'm in. Like, and I'm not in because it sounds comfortable. I'm in because it sounds right. That sounds deeply uncomfortable, actually. I'd rather sit alone with my phone, importing data that I think is relevant and deciding that I'm the end all be all of knowledge, right? And yet I think so much of what we're describing are these after effects of, so in my bishop, I'm Episcopalian too. My bishop is a student and practitioner of nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg's like famed kind of theory. And it strikes me that so much of what we're describing is violence, even in these micro ways. Like, we are such a violent society. And I think part of what makes us resistant to address something as large as gun violence means we'd also have to address all of those small violent ways, and ultimately the ways in which we're complicit. As soon as that din starts to quiet, we realize our role in this. So how do we have those hard conversations? Where does that happen? It's an easy answer, right? I'm sure you have one.
Well, we're not in a vacuum, right? So it's
thanks be to God.
It's probably easy for Hannah and I to say, be nonviolent, coming from a white cis hetero, lower middle class. Like we're in a pretty good spot, right? So the reason nonviolence works with Jesus is because he is in solidarity with the oppressed. So if I am to hold someone of my social location accountable, that looks different than trying to hold someone accountable who has a higher or lower social location than I do. So if I see someone who has a lower social location than I do, wanting to be violent, it's not just me saying, "Hey, don't do that." Right? That'll just be like some pious holier than thou.
Mm-hmm.
But it's me saying, "What do you need? How can I help you? What can I do?" Because we know that even if like in our world of live streaming stuff, we could theoretically see this playing out being live streamed. We know that if I'm telling someone not to do it and they're of a lower social location than me and they end up doing it, it'll just platform me even more and further stereotype that person than what we need. So it has to be a thing of us stepping in alongside them, and lifting everybody up. It goes with none of us are free till all of us are free. It goes with raising all boats. It's selling everything you have and giving it to the poor, because that's a solidarity move with the poor. It's not just selling everything, keeping that money, and then choosing like who it trickles down to,
Mm-hmm.
but that all of this happens at the same time as solidarity with the poor and oppressed, solidarity with everything that the Beatitudes is talking with. So it means also losing some of our own social location that is beneficial to us in that effort.
You know what I've been saying, Mike, as somebody who occupies a similar social location with an immense amount of privilege, I have just started saying privilege is not worth anything unless I spend it. Like, how can I use this? How can I, again, because what I remember is that Jesus, when Peter grabbed a sword and cut the ear off of the soldier, Jesus repaired that even in a slight that wasn't life ending, right? That like our God still repairs. And so I think it's trying to sincerely survey which of those invitations, as you so brilliantly laid out, right? Of like being really careful with how we choose to have hard conversations for the sake of those involved and for the sake of the practice. I think in doing that, you all are a perfect example. Is once we've seen people do it, we know it's possible. And if it's possible for you all, it's got to be possible for somebody else. That sort of ripple effect of possibility might be the only way we actually affect change.
And none of it is alone. If
Right.
we like to think, I think our I don't know, theological discourse can feel like it's happening in high places, and in that sense, it's happening all up in our head, and so
Mm-hmm.
we can be pulled into this individualized version of what we're talking about, but there is no individual version of what we're talking about. It's all in
Yes.
community. It doesn't happen without community because of that kind of like reciprocal growth that you're talking about. When I see someone else do it, that gives me courage to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That works in very harmful ways too. We can see
Certainly.
that we can see kind of these multiple options, because I really don't think it's a binary option. I think that there are multiple options for us to step into nonviolent choices. And
Mm-hmm.
one of our friends even recently talked about or quoted Buechner in using our greatest joy to meet the world's greatest need. That's the
Mm-hmm.
intersection for us to take the next step. And in those
Yes.
intersections, we'll see a lot of people who share similar joys that we can do this together with.
And that to me is a model of solidarity that churches are meant for, which is my unique effort with your unique effort actually speaks to a broader capacity and possibility, and that is the work our God models for us. Um, right? That like, yes, I think that's awesome. I having literally, Mike, I don't know if you were on when I said this, but I'm literally like in a seminary classroom right now, having finished my required studies for the day. The discourse is happening for sure, and it does tend to stay right here. I was literally in a class today where we were talking about accountability and in grouping and judgment, and naming these things is great, but what happens after we've named them, right? Is how are we joining in solidarity with those who are doing this work, who are the most impacted by this work, and who see the most opportunity? Have you all, I know we're kind of coming to the end ish, but Lauren, if I may ask another question, I would love to hear about you all in solidarity with other communities of yours. And maybe this can kind of be the like wrapping up ish. Is I want to know what those ripple effects look like for you all. Like, tell us about some of the ways that the Spirit has surprised you.
I mean, for me, it's I could go on. This could be the biggest question, but I didn't really. I mean, growing up in the church, growing up with my faith of who Jesus was, it wasn't until I actually, as an adult 22-year-old, that I read the Gospels myself. And I was like, holy smokes, I've missed out on so much in my last 22 years of what my faith actually means. I couldn't believe that I had not been taught the actual life of Jesus. I had been taught the birth, the death, the resurrection, and then Paul.
Yes.
So I mean, that was life-changing for me, was seeing how Jesus showed up. Jesus just showed up. And I don't mean, like activism is the way. Like, Jesus had passions and gifts and showed up how he could, and he showed other people how they could do the same. We have so many examples from the Bible of people who, were a prayer person, and that was their work. They could make things happen through prayer. And we saw, other people who were feeding, who were just making meals. And I just feel like there's so many examples. And it was honestly not until I was 22 that I realized just how much my faith was interconnected with the rest of my community. That Hebrews 13:3 scripture that says, remember the imprisoned as if you are imprisoned yourself. Remember the oppressed as if you yourself are oppressed. And I just saw this interconnectedness of we all stem from the same seed. We have all, like, we are a grove and we have all come from the same place. And when one tree is having an issue, it affects the rest of the of the grove, of the orchard. And so being able to see that as what happens to one of us happens to all of us. And it's been incredible for me to be able to get connected, do work with public education, to do work with my church, to do work with the immigrant population, to do work with the Christian population in different churches, and the non-religious side, seeing how things overlap in so many different places has just been beautiful for me. Seeing that touching on one need ends up touching on like 20 other needs just by this one thing. And so that's been the biggest gift to me in this last decade, is seeing how far things stretch when I'm able to do something, when I show up for somebody shows up for me, and the way that can fill me up and give me what I need to be able to continue the work and allow other people to do their work as well, to create a strong grove, to create fruitful trees, where we're doing something and we're helping our Colorado Springs community to see the fruit of the Spirit, to see this kingdom is not something we have to wait for. It's here now. The possibility is here now, and we are doing it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's fun to be what you're talking about, spending your privilege. That's often having to spend time with people who are like you on behalf of people who are navigating trauma because of people like me. And so,
Ooh.
I think I've seen a lot of people talk about like finding your calling. I have a lot of baggage with that from what I grew up with. So I like the language of what Parker Palmer says, doing what you can't not do. And right now, that
Doing what you
is,
can't not do.
yeah,
Oh, I love that.
for me, because of our work of turning guns to garden tools, um, it means that we're interfacing a lot with gun owners. And there's a lot of this work in the gun violence prevention community where where non-gun owners and gun owners are pretty siloed from each other. Like in the gun violence prevention space, it's not very common. And so being able to hold that space for someone who wants to get rid of their guns or say, hey, I don't want this AK-47 or assault style rifle, but I'm going to keep my handguns. And then 5 years later, that same person says, okay, I'm ready to give up my handguns now, but I still have hunting guns. So there's piece of that of helping come alongside people who are navigating letting go of violence. And also from like the white male perspective of also saying that when I do this, I feel like I'm getting rid of some of my masculinity, and that feels depraving to me. So there's this vacuum there, and it's fun when they're invited to the anvil because that feels really masculine to do blacksmithing work,
Ooh.
type man thing to do for a lot of folks. Certainly, it's not limited to that. But that is a space where they can kind of say, I'm giving up this gun, but I'm also picking up this hammer. And that feels like I'm not losing anything, but I am in many ways often gaining something. Like I'm filling it up, I'm picking it up. And blacksmithing is already becoming this huge kind of like hobbyist resurgence. So it's not because of us, but because of the show that actually makes weapons, which is a whole other thing.
Awesome.
But it's like this. I don't even want to say the name of the show, but everyone knows what I'm talking about usually if they're familiar with blacksmithing. So it's about holding each other as we're processing this transformation, and that can be with the folks who look like us who are trying to transform on behalf of the folks that we have collectively harmed in our heritage, not just in our lifetime, in our heritage too. That's something that we can work at repairing. So it's almost all of these questions have both and answers, and that can feel like a lot, but it's also make joy a part of it so that it doesn't feel as heavy a load.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for sharing the many ways in which you're transforming the materials of war and of violence into the raw material of life. I had never caught the inversion of the name until now, war to raw, and I appreciate that.
That was very
That's beautiful. And yeah, thanks for giving us heaven today. It's been great to be in conversation, and we're so grateful for the work that you're doing in the world.
I would love to know how people can connect with you all, how to find out more about the good work that you're doing, and how to maybe better discern where they can plug into some good work of their own.
Well, you can always visit rawtools.org. That you can find out more about the different ways that people can connect and volunteer. There's things happening all across the country. We have different affiliates: Philly, Buffalo, Raw Tools South, and Asheville, North Carolina, and a lot of churches doing our programming, Guns to Gardens. So there are different ways. We partner with Presbyterian Peace Fellowship for some of that. They have a huge lift in a lot of the training and how you do some of these things. But then also, I mean, if you're in Colorado Springs, we'd love to see you here at Bethel Mennonite Church. Just come visit and say hey. That doesn't have to be on a Sunday. That can be online. You can feel us out first, maybe. But yeah, come say hi if you're in Colorado Springs, whether that's here or at our Raw Tools office is here as well. So, and then you can check out Hannah's children's book that just came out too, Sparking Peace, and figure out how to help talk to kids about these tough conversations that we've been having here too. So there are different ways to engage, and I'm sure our emails are out there too.
Hannah, I presume you have a website? in particular, like maybe a place where we can buy the book?
You can get the book from Menno Media or Herald Press, and some local places, depending on where you live, are selling it as well. It is also in the bigger box spaces. But I am an educator and a pastor, which means I love to collaborate. I do not believe in carrying the load alone. So the resources that I have created for my own faith community or for my own children, I really want to be able to give to the rest of the world, and to get feedback and ways I can tweak it and make it available to others, and to hear wonderful, resources that you have found. So I would love anybody who's interested in seeing my past Kids Summer workshops, or Lauren actually got to come to our East of St. Martin of Tours Day. Here in Colorado Springs, we do have a very big Veterans Day celebration happening at schools and things like that. And so we actually take November 11th off, and we open up our church doors, and we allow anyone, children to adults, to come and spend the entire day with us. We have programming throughout the day, and we just talk about St. Martin of Tours, if you haven't heard of him, and how we can be peacemakers. We have some practices that we get to incorporate, and crafts and things. So yeah, I want to share and also be shared with. So my email is hannah@bmccs.org. And I'd love for people to reach out, and I will happily share whatever you would like.
Ooh!
Amazing.
I'm personally very excited about all of those prospects, and will be going very quickly.
Hannah,
Thank you
Mike,
both for offering us this
yeah,
real taste of heaven. This is a real nugget that's going to keep my embers aflame for a long time. Like, this one's going to burn for a long time. A lot of metaphors mixed in there, but you get it.
I like fire, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, keep it burning, shall we?
No, thanks for having us. This was fun.
Yes, it was.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of A Soulful Revolution. You'll find links to follow our guests and the resources they shared in the show notes. As always, A Soulful Revolution is entirely made possible by listeners like you. If you like what you heard today, please consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack, or sending us an appreciative gift on Buy Me a Coffee. Your solidarity helps us to bring more conversations like this into the world, and we're grateful. Our theme music was created by Richard Ash, Andy McGantz, and Ben Schreiber, with production by Richard Ash for Plus Ultra Audio. A Soulful Revolution is produced by Stephanie Whitehouse of SPW Design Media. We'll see you next time, Soulful Revolutionaries.